Welcome to this deep dive.
Oh, cool.
Where we're going back in time
Okay.
to Elizabethan theater.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to unravel a feud known as the War of the Theaters.
Interesting.
Playwrights using their art as weapons.
Wow.
Trading insults and launching literary grenades.
Uh-huh.
Right there on the stage.
Oh, wow.
And our sources for this deep dive are academic papers that kind of set the scene.
Right.
And a particularly juicy primary source.
Oh, cool.
A play called Poetaster, written by one of the feuding playwrights. Can you imagine the audacity?
But he captures that competitive spirit.
Yeah.
The Elizabethan theater scene.
Right.
These plays weren't just entertainment.
Yeah.
They were platforms for social commentary, satire, and, as we'll discover, very personal attacks.
So who are the key players in this theatrical showdown?
The main protagonist, if you will, is Ben Jonson, scholar playwright, known for his sharp wit and satirical comedies. He believed that true poetry went hand in hand with good morals, a belief that perhaps explains his tendency to criticize his rivals.
And who was his primary target?
The playwright who seemed to get under his skin the most was John Marston, a younger writer known for his flamboyant style and clever wordplay. Think of him as the polar opposite of Jonson in terms of literary approach. And adding another layer of complexity to this feud is Thomas Dekker. A playwright initially allied with Jonson. They had a common enemy. But as the story unfolds, Dekker was lured to the other side, joining forces with Jonson's rivals to pen a retort play called Satiromastics.
Satiromastics.
It literally translates to satire whip.
That sounds like a serious clapback.
So you can imagine it didn't pull any punches.
So what was the root of this theatrical war? Was it just clashing personalities and egos?
Like many historical feuds, the exact reasons are still debated by scholars. There's evidence suggesting professional jealousy played a role. Court patronage was a coveted prize for Elizabethan playwrights. So competition was fierce. But beyond that, we see hints of clashes over literary styles and perhaps even personal slights that fueled the fire.
So how did Poetaster become Jonson's weapon of choice in this war of words?
So
what did he actually write about his rivals?
Jonson was incredibly bold in his use of Poetaster to lampoon his contemporaries. In the play, he portrays John Marston under the character name Crispinus as a foppish, pretentious poet, obsessed with appearances and noble connections. He even mocks Marston's writing style, portraying him as someone who favors obscure vocabulary over substance. One of the most scathing insults hurled at Crispinus, and by extension Marston, is that he's a horse-on galley slave with a glib and oily art for language. It gives you a glimpse into how personal these attacks could be.
That's rough. It sounds like Jonson was aiming to publicly humiliate Marston with this play. What's interesting is that Jonson didn't just go after Marston's writing. He also seemed to target his personal aspirations.
You're right. Jonson seems to mock Marston's desire for social climbing by calling him a dresser of plays about town.
Wow!
Basically implying that he cared more about being seen in the right circles than creating meaningful art. But this insult, while pointed, also reveals something deeper about Jonson's own anxieties. You see, Jonson, despite his education and talent, came from a humble background, while Marston's father was a lawyer with connections to the elite. So perhaps we can interpret these attacks as reflecting Jonson's own insecurities about social status and his desire for recognition from the literary establishment.
So it wasn't just artistic differences.
It's never that simple, is it?
You're right.
Human emotions are complex, especially in a highly competitive field like Elizabethan theater. Jonson was clearly a talented playwright, but also quite sensitive to criticism and perhaps a bit envious of Marston's social connections.
Okay, so we've seen how Jonson went after Marston in Poetaster.
Right.
But what about Dekker?
Okay.
How did he get dragged into this theatrical brawl?
Remember how I mentioned Dekker was initially on Jonson's side?
Right.
They'd even collaborated on a play before Poetaster.
Right.
But something shifted.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was a personal falling out.
Okay.
Or as some scholars suggest,
Yeah.
a strategic move by Jonson's rivals to recruit Dekker to their side.
Wow.
Whatever the reason.
Right.
Dekker ended up writing Satiromastics.
Right.
Which directly targeted Jonson.
Okay.
Turning the tables in a rather dramatic fashion.
So Satiromastics was basically Dekker's I got your back, Marston moment.
Yeah.
What was his strategy in responding to Jonson?
Well,
did he stoop to the same level?
He took a different approach.
Okay.
Instead of directly attacking Jonson's writing, he focused on his personality.
Okay.
Portraying him as Horace in the play.
Right.
Horace is depicted as arrogant and envious.
Okay.
He's even physically imposing. Which is interesting because we know Jonson himself was a rather large man.
Okay.
In one memorable scene,
Yeah.
Horace is force-fed pills
Wow.
meant to purge him
Yeah.
of his inflated vocabulary.
Oh my God.
Both a literal and figurative attack on Jonson's penchant for elaborate language.
So this scene's particularly striking because it kind of encapsulates one of the key tensions of the War of the Theaters. It represents a clash between two different ideas about what constitutes good writing.
Exactly.
Jonson, with his classical education, championed a style that emphasized wit and erudition.
Right.
Dekker, on the other hand, favored a more accessible populist style that resonated with a wider audience. So Dekker's satire whip wasn't just a personal attack. It was a statement about different artistic styles and audiences.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Right.
But what happened next? Did this theatrical battle escalate beyond the stage?
It most certainly did.
Okay.
Remember, we're only scratching the surface here.
Right.
The War of the Theaters wasn't just confined to Poetaster and Satiromastics.
Right.
These plays were just the most visible battles in a larger war that spilled over into other writings, personal letters, and even public gossip.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Good.
I need to know more about how this feud played out beyond the stage.
Yeah.
But before we dive into that rabbit hole, let's take a moment to consider why this centuries-old squabble matters to us today.
Yeah.
You with me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's easy to dismiss these historical dramas as mere gossip.
Right.
But the War of the Theaters offers us a unique glimpse into the creative world of Elizabethan England.
Okay.
And the power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
These playwrights weren't just artists.
Right.
They were social commentators, influencers of their time.
Yeah.
And their work reflects the anxieties and aspirations of their era.
I'm starting to see why this War of the Theaters is more than just a petty squabble. It's a window into a fascinating period of history and a reminder that some things never change.
Right. Artists will always have their rivalries, and they'll always find ways to express them, whether on a stage, in a book, or on social media.
So to really understand the War of the Theaters, we need to look beyond the plays themselves and explore how these writers engaged with each other off the stage.
Right.
Think of it like a detective story. We have the main players, the crime scene, which in this case is the Elizabethan stage. And now we need to piece together the clues scattered across their other writings and the historical record.
That's a great way to think about it. These additional sources, like letters, epigrams, and even contemporary gossip, can shed light on their motivations, their personal relationships, and the wider social and political context that fueled this feud.
All right, let's put on our detective hats.
Okay.
And dig a little deeper.
Sounds good.
I'm ready for some juicy historical gossip.
Okay.
Where do we start?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that the insults and barbs didn't stop when the curtain fell.
Oh, wow.
Jonson and Marston continued their feud through other forms of writing. For instance, they exchanged a series of pointed epigrams.
Epigrams, you say?
Which are short, witty poems. Often used to satirize or criticize someone.
Sounds like the Elizabethan version of a Twitter diss track. Can you give us some examples?
Okay, imagine this.
Okay.
Jonson accuses Marston of plagiarism.
Oh, wow.
In one of his epigrams.
Okay.
He basically says, "You steal and purloin from everyone."
Ouch.
Implying that Marston's work lacked originality.
I bet that didn't go over well. Did Marston fire back?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Marston wasn't one to back down from a challenge.
Right.
He retaliated by calling Jonson a poetaster.
Okay.
In his own epigram.
Right.
Which, as you might recall,
yeah,
means a writer of insignificant verses.
Okay.
He's essentially saying that Jonson, for all his high-minded talk about good poetry, wasn't actually that talented.
So even off stage,
yeah,
the insults were flying. It's almost like they couldn't resist poking at each other.
And it's important to remember that these exchanges weren't just private squabbles.
Right.
They were often circulated among the literary elite.
Okay.
And even performed at court.
Wow.
So in a way, their feud was a form of public entertainment.
Really?
Fueling gossip and intrigue within their circle.
It's almost like reality TV.
Yeah.
But with more eloquent insults.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of reputation and public perception in Elizabethan England. These playwrights were acutely aware of their image and how it impacted their careers.
So beyond their own writings, did anyone else weigh in on this feud?
Luckily for us, we have some juicy accounts from contemporary writers and critics who gossiped about the feud and its implications.
Do tell.
These sources offer valuable insights into how the feud was perceived by the public and the wider literary community.
What were people saying?
Well, opinions were divided, of course. Some saw it as a genuine clash of literary titans. A debate about the nature of good writing and the role of satire in society. Others dismissed it as a petty rivalry. Fueled by ego and professional jealousy. It's fascinating to see how their contemporaries tried to decode their motivations and analyze their work through the lens of this feud.
So it wasn't just about the playwrights themselves. It was about how their feud reflected the broader cultural landscape of Elizabethan England.
This War of the Theaters was like a microcosm of the larger tensions and anxieties of their time. It touched upon issues of social mobility, artistic ambition, and the struggle for power and influence in a rapidly changing world.
It makes you wonder if they were even aware of the impact their feud was having, or if they were just caught up in the moment. Speaking of impact, are there any specific examples?
Well, remember how Jonson mocked lawyers in Poetaster? Turns out that landed him in some legal hot water.
Really?
He was accused of libel.
Wow.
And actually imprisoned for a short time.
Talk about life imitating art.
Right.
So his sharp wit actually got him into trouble. What about Marston?
Ironically, Marston, despite being portrayed as a foppish poet, obsessed with style, came from a family of lawyers.
Really?
And actually inherited his father's law books.
That is quite the twist.
It makes you wonder if Jonson knew about this and used it to deliberately mock Marston.
It's certainly possible. And it adds another layer of complexity to their relationship. Were they truly bitter enemies? Or was there a sense of begrudging respect beneath the surface of their insults?
It's almost like they were frenemies before that term even existed. They were rivals, but also bound together by their shared passion for the theater.
That's a great observation. And it's something to keep in mind. As we delve deeper into this feud, these were complex individuals with their own ambitions, insecurities, and ultimately a shared love for their craft.
All right, so we've established that this feud wasn't just confined to the stage. It spilled over into their writings, their personal lives, and even impacted their legal standing. But did it ultimately have a winner? That's a good question. And it's not easy to answer. While Jonson may have delivered the final blow on stage with Poetaster, Decker's response in Satirimastics ensured that Jonson didn't go unscathed. And remember, both plays continued to circulate and be performed. So the battle continued in the hearts and minds of the audience.
So it was less of a knockout punch and more of a long, drawn-out wrestling match. With both sides landing some pretty solid blows.
And even though the feud eventually faded from public view, it had a lasting impact on their reputations.
Okay.
Jonson, with his sharp wit,
Right.
and penchant for satire, cemented his image as a literary provocateur.
Right.
Marston and Dekker,
Yeah.
through their willingness to challenge him,
Yeah.
gained recognition for their own unique styles and perspectives.
So in a way, they all achieved a kind of immortality through this feud, even if it wasn't the kind they were initially aiming for.
And it's important to remember that despite all the mudslinging and insults, there's evidence that some of these rivals eventually reconciled.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Did they end up burying the hatchet and becoming best buds?
Well, best buds might be a stretch.
Okay.
But we do know that Jonson and Marston collaborated.
Oh, wow.
On a play a few years after the War of the Theaters.
Okay.
It suggests that their shared passion for the stage might have eventually trumped their personal differences.
That's actually quite heartwarming.
Yeah.
It gives me hope for humanity.
It does show that even the most bitter rivalries can sometimes give way to forgiveness and collaboration.
But it also raises questions about their motivations.
Right.
Yeah.
Were they genuinely reconciling?
Right.
Or was it a strategic move to boost their careers?
So maybe it wasn't all bad blood.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were just playing nice for the sake of their careers.
Right.
After all, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
That's an interesting point.
Right.
And it reminds us that these historical figures were complex individuals with their own ambitions and desires. We can analyze their work and their actions, but we can never truly know what was going on in their hearts and minds.
That's true.
Yeah.
We can only speculate and try to piece together the clues they left behind.
Great.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive into the War of the Theaters, I think it's important to step back and consider what this feud can teach us about the world we live in today.
Yeah.
After all, haven't we seen similar battles play out just in our own time, just on different stages?
The desire to use public platforms to settle scores or express frustration seems to be a part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And with the rise of the internet and social media, the lines between public and private art and life are even blurrier than they were in Elizabethan England.
That's a great point.
Think of modern-day celebrity feuds that play out on Twitter. Or musicians who diss each other in their songs. It's the same impulse, just expressed through different mediums.
It's like holding a mirror up to our own times.
Right.
And it makes you wonder if these Elizabethan playwrights were alive today, what platforms would they use to battle it out?
Would Jonson be a Twitter warrior?
Right.
Firing off witty barbs?
Yeah.
In 280 characters or less?
Right.
Would Marston be an Instagram influencer, crafting his image, and engaging in subtle shade throwing through carefully curated posts?
These are questions that deserve their own deep dive.
Indeed.
But we'll leave that for another episode.
But for now, I think it's important to acknowledge that these historical feuds, while entertaining, also raise some important questions about the role of art in society and the responsibilities of artists. Can art be a tool for personal vendettas? Is there a line between satire and libel? Where do we draw the boundaries between free speech and responsible expression?
Those are some weighty questions, and I think they're particularly relevant in our current climate of social media call-outs and online debates.
Exactly. The War of the Theaters may have happened centuries ago, but the questions it raises about artistic expression, public image, and the power of words are as relevant today as they were in Elizabethan England.
So as we wrap up this exploration of the War of the Theaters, what are the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to ponder? What can they learn from this historical feud? Their world feels surprisingly familiar. Like their ambition, their rivalries, their desire for recognition. It's all very human, very relatable, even after all these centuries.
You've hit the nail on the head. The War of the Theaters might seem like a dusty historical footnote. But it's so much more than that. It's a story about the power of words, the allure of fame, and the complexities of human relationships, all set against the backdrop of a vibrant and rapidly changing society.
And what I find particularly fascinating is how this feud kind of transcended the individuals involved.
Right.
It became this larger cultural phenomenon, a talking point for the elite, a source of gossip and speculation for the public.
Yes, and it's a reminder that artists, especially those who achieve a certain level of fame, are never just creating in a vacuum.
Okay.
They're part of a larger cultural conversation.
Yeah.
And their work can have ripple effects that extend far beyond their intentions.
So if we were to step back and look at the War of the Theaters from a bird's eye view, what would be the key takeaways for our listeners?
First and foremost, I think it reminds us that art is never created in isolation.
Right.
It's always influenced by the social, political, and personal context of its time.
These playwrights weren't just writing for entertainment. They were engaging with the big questions of their day.
Exactly.
Using satire and wit to comment on everything.
Right.
From social mobility to artistic integrity.
And it also highlights the power of words to both wound and inspire.
Yeah.
These playwrights use their pens as weapons. But they also use them to craft beautiful and enduring works of art.
Right.
It's a reminder that language can be both a destructive and a creative force.
Right.
Depending on how it's wielded.
And I think it's important to remember that even though we've focused on the conflict in this deep dive, there were moments of collaboration and reconciliation too.
Exactly.
Jonson and Marston eventually worked together again, proving that even the most heated rivalries can sometimes give way to forgiveness and shared purpose.
That's a hopeful thought,
Yeah.
especially in our current climate of polarization and division.
It suggests that common ground and shared goals can sometimes bridge even the deepest divides.
Indeed. And I think it's important for us as consumers of art and culture to be aware of the historical and personal context that shape the works we encounter.
Okay.
By understanding the motivations, the anxieties, and the aspirations of the creators, we can gain a deeper appreciation for their work and its relevance to our own lives.
So as we leave the world of Elizabethan theater and return to the present day,
armed with this new knowledge of the War of the Theaters, what's the one thing?
I'd say this. The next time you encounter a public feud, a clash of opinions, or even just a spirited debate online, take a moment to consider the deeper currents at play. Look beyond the surface-level drama and ask yourself, what are the underlying motivations? What are the stakes? And what can we learn from this exchange? Both about the individuals involved and the larger society they inhabit.
That's great advice.
Thanks.
After all, who knows, maybe our own Twitter feuds and Instagram dramas will one day be the subject of a deep dive, analyzed by future historians for their cultural significance.
But until then, let's keep exploring the past, learning from its stories, and using those insights to navigate the complexities of our present.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Thank you.
Into the War of the Theaters.